Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be filming my end of the year stats video and my review video for the end of the year. This is one of my favorite videos to make every year, and this is where I get to show you all of my nerdy stats of like all the different things that I read this year. If you are here to see all of the books that I read this year, that won't be included in this video. I am going to be doing another video after this that's going to be tier ranking every single book that I read in the year of 2021. But this is going to be all of the nerdy stats and the things that I like to know from my reading this year that I think is kind of like, it's fun, it's cool. So yeah, let's just jump right into it, shall we? I think some of the most cool information comes from my Goodreads like year in books page, so we'll start there. So in the year of 2021, I read 167 books, which is an all-time record for me. I feel like every single year that just keeps happening. I keep crushing my previous year's record. And I think last year I read around like 140-ish books. Like I think for the last 2 years I've read somewhere around 140. So to be able to get up to 167 is incredible. And when we look at my month to month, you'll see why. But wow, amazing! I'm so proud of that number, 167 books. And with those 167 books, I read a total of 55,822 pages this year. The shortest book that I read this year ended up being Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, because this is 102 pages, which I don't even know, like this is according to Goodreads, but I don't even know if this is my shortest book because I feel like I read books that were shorter, but like sure, we'll go with it. And then for the longest book, it's The Stand by Stephen King at 1,200 pages. And as of now, this is tied for the longest book that I've ever read, and it's actually tied with It by Stephen King, which also just so happens to be 1,200 pages. The average book length of books that I was reading in this year was 334 pages. So that's pretty cool that that was the average, because I feel like that's like a pretty decent size, you know, average length book. And then the most popular book that I read this year that has been read by many other people is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This has been read by 1.9 million other people. And then the least popular is actually a book that I very just recently read within these last few days, because it's Alone in Space. This one has only been shelved by 2,400 other people, but I think it's because this book is fairly new. But yeah, this was really cute, so I think more people should check this out. Here's where it gets exciting, because my average rating for 2021 was a 3.7 out of 5. Like, how great is that? Because if you didn't know, for these last couple of years, I've had a consistent 3.5, but I think last year, I'm pretty sure, I'll have to go back and check, but I think I either had a 3.7 or a 3.8 last year, which was just incredible. It means that my reading is getting better, you know, because I'm enjoying more of what I'm reading, and I'm just like DNFing things that I'm not enjoying, which is good for me. So a 3.7, that's pretty high. And then the first book that I read in the year of 2021 was The Dating Plan, all the way back in January. And the last book that I read this year was You Better Be Lightning by Andrea Gibson. And it's pretty cool because these ended up both being 4-star books for me. So we started the year with a 4-star and I ended the year with a 4-star. How magical. And now to get into all of the nerdy stats. If you didn't know, I do track all of my reading on this really kind of over the top page where I track, like at the very end of the year, I write all of this information down, and I just track this all from my Goodreads, which is, you know, really fun to do. I know a lot of people prefer to do things digitally these days, but I find it very satisfying to have this journal spread at the end of the year where I just like have all of my stats. So starting off with the month-to-month stats. This is one that I thought was very interesting, because if you look at a lot of my previous years, I was averagely reading about 11 to 15 books a month is my normal for like the last couple of years, you know? But this year, if you look, I am mostly averaging, I mean, I guess my average is like between like maybe like 12 and 16, but there were a few months that I just went absolutely bonkers and read a lot. Like if you can tell, October, I read 22 freaking books in October. Like that is the most I've ever read in 1 month. And I was even reading, like, I only read a few, like, novella, like, short stories in that month, but for the most part, I was just listening to a lot of audiobooks in October. I don't know, I'm really excited with this, and same with, like, in July, I read 18 books, and that was mostly due to Summerween. That was in July. I was able to read a lot in the month of July. And my lowest reading month that I had this year was in February. I only read 8 books, and that's not only because February is the shortest month of the year, so it makes sense that I didn't read as much, but also because February was an insanely busy month for me at my job. We have a sandwich sale during the month of February at my job, and it was just so incredibly busy, so I barely had any time to even freaking breathe, let alone read. So that's why that number is quite lower there. But mostly, you know, I had a really great reading year. I read a lot, especially in the second half of the year. I read so freaking much. It's insane. All right, and then the next chart that I wanted to look at is the different kinds of books that I was reading this year, and this chart is the most fascinating to me because there's so much difference in this year, as you will see. So the kind of books, this year I only read 58 physical books, 8 ebooks, and 101 audiobooks. I have completely converted to being an audiobook lover. Not that I was ever like an audiobook hater, like I've always been in support of audiobooks, I just want to make that clear. I just mean that now I tend to gravitate towards the audiobooks more than like reading the book physically. And I think that's for a couple reasons. Like the audiobooks definitely help my brain stay focused more, and I like that I can speed up the audiobook so that I can get through a book in a lot quicker of a time usually. And I don't have any issues with like not being able to understand or take in the story the same. Like it's all the same to me whether I read it physically or listen to the audiobook. And you might be surprised that this number's so high, but I also included like if there was ever a time where I read the book physically while listening to the audiobook, I counted it as an audiobook. Just wanted to see how many audiobooks I was actually listening to this year, and holy shit, over 100 audiobooks this year. And that's incredible, and that's all thanks to my freaking library. If you have the Libby app, it's incredible, it saves lives. Also because Libro is also amazing. I get audiobooks from Libro a lot, like I purchase them myself, but then I also am a part of the Libro ALC program, which is advanced listening copies, so they send me about like 6 to 7 audiobooks every month to check out. And so I was just listening to like a shit ton of audiobooks this year. It's great. And also, if you are looking to make the change from like Audible to Libro, I highly recommend checking out Libro because they will support your local bookstore instead of supporting Jeff Bezos. So if you want to make the switch to Libro, I do have a link in my description. That's like my affiliate link. And with that link, you do get 2 audiobooks for the price of 1. So you can treat yourself and be supporting your local indie bookstores. How great is that? Anyways, back to it. Audiobooks, amazing. Next up, I wanted to go through my different ratings that I had this year because since my average rating was so high, I was really excited to see the different kind of ratings I was giving out this year. So if you look at my little chart here, 40 of the books that I read this year were 5-star books. 40 freaking 5-star books. That's amazing. I also want to mention I do include my rereads in this though. And then 60 4-star books, 37 3-star books, 27 2-star books, and only 3 1-star books. But yeah, isn't that amazing? Like I had 100 books that were either 5 or 4-star books for me this year. Like that is amazing. That is incredible. I'm so glad that 40 out of those like 167 books were that high, like 5-star books for me. Like that's so incredible. And that definitely makes sense why my average, you know, rating was so much higher this year because I had more books that I loved. And I love that. All right, next up, we're going to be looking at the gender of the author. This year I had 38 male authors, 125 female authors, and 3 authors that were either non-binary or it was part of some collection of some kind that had multiple authors on it. Yeah, typically my female author is always going to be the highest just because that's just my reading taste, I guess. Like I tend to read a lot more books that are written by women. But also I notice like as my taste starts to lean more towards horror novels, I am reading more male authors than I ever have before. I'm kind of happy that I was still able to read 125 female authors this year. Like that's amazing. And then young adult versus adult books. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by this little chart because I only read 21 young adult books this year and then I read 146 adult books. And with this adult books, I also included any like nonfiction kind of books or poetry unless it was specifically put on there that it's a young adult. I just included that in the adult category. So, you know, most of what I'm reading these days is adult. I am gravitating less and less towards young adult. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still a few young adult books that I end up really enjoying, but for the most part, they never end up being like my favorites of the year anymore. Like, I don't know. I'm just gravitating more and more towards adult books, which is cool, you know, it's fine. And then the next category is going to be what year the books that I read were published in. I don't think this list will be very surprising either because I read 108 books that were published this year in 2021. I read 17 books that were published in 2020. I read 41 books that were published before 2020, and I read 1 book that's coming out in 2022. You know, as I said, I am mostly reading new releases because I get really excited about the new releases and I just have to read all of them like as they're coming out because they're so hyped and I want to be on the freaking hype train, you know? So it doesn't surprise me at all that 108 of the books that I read this year came out this year. And I think that's like the main reason why I would love love to read mostly new releases for the book troop because those are just the books that I get the most excited about, you know? But yeah, I'm pretty surprised that I have read 41 books that came out before 2020. I mean, that's pretty decent. That's a good amount of backlist that I was able to get to this year. I wanted to quickly show you some of the books that I read this year that were published the longest time ago, because I don't tend to read classics a lot, so I would just like to point out whenever I do. Like, I read The Stand this year, which originally published in 1978. I read Carrie by Stephen King, which came out in 1974, and then I read The Haunting of Hill House, which came out in 1959, and Then There Were None, which came out in 1939. So, And Then There Were None takes the cake for the oldest book that I read this year. But yeah, not too bad. I read a couple books that were like, you know, a little bit older this year. All right, the next chart that I wanted to look at is one that I really like to make every year because it's either new authors or authors that I've read before. And I like to do this list because I like to see whether I'm reading more new authors that I've never read their books before, or whether I'm going back and reading books from authors that I already know their style and I might already love their writing. So on this list, I read 89 new authors this year, and I read 77 authors that I've read before. And I think that that's pretty freaking cool because I'm always wondering if that margin is gonna get like, you know, more closer together. I think this is the closest it's ever been with like 89 and 77. Like, that's pretty close. Just because I wonder with like every year, the more that I read, I wonder if it's ever gonna get to the point where I'm reading a lot more authors that I've read from before, because as I read more books, I'll be trying out more authors. But then it's like, I also know that as the years go on, there will be more and more people publishing debut stories, you know? So it's kind of like, I don't know if it'll ever, if it'll ever catch up. Like, we'll just have to see. And then the next and the last chart that I have is the genres. And this is like one of my favorite things to see because I just love to see what genre I'm reading the most this year. Because as you know, I'm quite the thriller, horror, romance reader. Like, those are my three comfort genres. And as you can see from this list, I read 57 thrillers this year, so thrillers take the cake for the genre that I read the most this year. And then for romances, I read 27 romances this year. I read 43 horror books this year, 14 contemporary books, 7 literary fiction books, 3 sci-fis, 4 historical fictions, 6 fantasy, and 6 non-fictions. And what I mean by fantasy, it's like very light fantasy that I'm talking about here, okay? We're talking some like very light magical realism type of fantasy. And I know that some books fit into more than one genre, so this is just the primary, like the first genre that's listed on Goodreads. That's the category that these books go into, or the category that I personally think fits the best for the book. But yeah, something surprising on this list is that, you know, horror, I'm like more of a horror reader now than I am a romance reader, which is really surprising. I read 43 horror books this year in comparison to the 27 romance books that I read. So I still am reading a lot of romance for sure. Like 27 books is still like a good amount of books, but 43 horror books, like I have completely gone to the dark side. And of course 57 thrillers. I mean, I'm not surprised that thrillers is what I've read the most of because those are the books that speak to my soul. You know, there's a reason why I have a thriller book club. It's because I fucking love thrillers. Something about these stats though that I find kind of interesting is the fact that I only read 3 sci-fi novels this year, and Project Hail Mary was one of those 3 sci-fis, and it ended up being my #1 favorite book of the year. So what does this say about me? Like, do I need to read more sci-fi? Is that what the universe is trying to tell me? It feels very like contemporary kind of sci-fi. It doesn't feel very fantasy-ish. Like, it has very light fantasy, but it's not too intense. And I think that's why I always hesitate to read sci-fi, because I do enjoy sci-fi, but I'm not a huge fantasy person, and I find that those genres tend to cross over a lot. But that's what I like about Andy Weir's sci-fi for the most part, is that they feel very grounded in reality and not too fantasy. So that's why I end up loving his books a lot. But this book was just like freaking incredible, amazing, takes the cake for everything. I love this book. But yeah, I don't know, maybe this is a sign that I need to read more sci-fi next year. I don't know. I am also kind of surprised on this list that I've only read 6 nonfiction books this year, and this was including any kind of like poetry. And I'm kind of surprised that it was only 6 this year, because I feel like last year I read at least like probably like 15 nonfiction books, so I'm kind of surprised that it's that low this year. And then just some other random things that I thought I would mention for this year. I reread 9 books this year. I think 6 of those ended up happening in the month of December, so 6 rereads in December and then 9 for the whole year. So I only reread 3 other books throughout the year, which makes sense, you know, because I'm always so hesitant to want to reread books like during the year, because I know that I'm gonna save time at the end of December to reread. But you know, every now and then when I get into like kind of a slumpy mood, I just need a reread to like pick me up and just like live my best life. And most of my rereading was a good experience this year, except for the Colleen Hoover rereads. Those were not a fun time. I also did want to mention that I read 20 of my ARCs this year. So like sometimes publishers will send me an advanced copy of a book and ask me to review it. And I read 20 of the ARCs that I was sent this year, which is good, you know, I want to stay a little bit on top of that. And then with Libro ALCs, I read 21 of the ALCs that Libro sent me this year. So like, as I said, I'm an affiliate with Libro and they send me advanced listener copies. And this year I got around to listening to 21 of them in the year of 2021. How fitting is that? I didn't even plan that. And then the last little stat thing that I have is that I read 30 of my Book of the Month selections this year, because if you didn't know, for the entire year of 2021, I've been so fortunate enough to be working with Book of the Month, and they've sent me at least 5 of their selections every single month for this whole year. So like, I'm doing my best to try and stay on top of reading the Book of the Month books, because I do genuinely love the Book of the Month selections so much. Like, that's why Book of the Month is one of my favorite sponsors to work with, because not only is it cool to work with another book company like that, but it's also like, I genuinely love the books that they pick and I'm always trying to read them and stay on top of my shit. And so yeah, I thought I would show you a quick stack of some of the highlights from Book of the Month this year for me personally. Some of these books were never actually selections for the month. Like, some of them were add-ons, like the John Green nonfiction that I read this year was really great. This one was an add-on. And then same with The Push. This one actually ended up being one of my top 5 favorite books of the year, and this one was only an add-on for Book of the Month. It was never actually a monthly selection, but it's freaking fantastic. But yeah, I think all the rest of these books were monthly picks at one point or another, and these are all just like the highlights of Book of the Month. These are the books that stayed with me the most. These are the books that I enjoyed reading the most, and I just had a great time with these this year. I also thought I would give you a quick look at some of the Book of the Month picks that I did not get to this year, that I did receive this year, that I'm looking forward to still reading the most next year. I think out of all of these books, the ones that I'm most likely to get to, I plan to read Somebody's Daughter in January. This is one that I'm very excited about. I also am really excited for A Little Hope. I have plans to read this in a video I'm doing next year. But I would also, I would just love to be able to get to all of these next year. I'm still really looking forward to them. I do have the audiobooks for Apples Never Fall, Olga Dies Dreaming, and The Inheritance, so I'm definitely planning on reading those 3 at some point next year as well. But yeah, all of these books, they still sound so good. I'm still so excited to read them, and you should let me know if there's any of these here that you think I should prioritize next year. I do still have a bunch of other Book of the Month titles as well from years in the past that I would still like to get to as well, but these are all of the ones that actually were selections, or at least they were as add-ons in the year of 2021. So these are all of the ones that I'm hoping to get to. I also thought I would mention here that 2021 was the first year of my book club called The Book Troop, where we read thrillers together every single month this year. I do have a playlist down below that will include all of the different live shows that we had together this year, as well as the Superlatives live show at the very end of the year that I did. But out of all the Book Troop picks this year, I think my 2 favorites were either False Witness by Karen Slaughter or The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor. These were definitely the most well-loved for me and for the audience, it seems, this year, so these 2 were pretty great. But also, I didn't even have one book that I gave 5 stars to for the Book Troop this year, so that kind of sucked a little bit. But when I look at my average rating for the Book Troop, like all the different ratings that I gave the books this year, I had 5 4-star books, which is like, you know, that's pretty high, and then 4 3-star books, 1 2-star, and 1 1-star. So I mean, looking at that, it's like most of the books that I did pick for my Book Troop book club, I did end up enjoying them. I guess the main reason why I found my book club to be kind of disappointing this year is because I didn't have a single book that I gave 5 stars to. But like, looking at the ratings overall, like I did give 5 different books 4 stars and 4 books 3 stars. So like 9 out of the 11 books that I had this year, I did enjoy for the most part, that's cool, you know, I love that. I also wanted to mention that this year I participated in 3 readathons that I hosted myself. So we did Winterween for the very first time this year in January 2021, and then we did Summerween for the second time this summer in July. It was so much fun. And then this year in October, for the very first time, me and Olivia hosted Camp Weekend Ween, and me and Olivia have hosted all 3 of these readathons. And Camp Weekend Ween was really fun because not only was it on Halloween weekend, but it was only only a weekend long readathon, so it was a little less pressure, you know, but it was so much fun and it was so great. And I would love to keep this format for, you know, going forward of doing winterween, summerween, and then like a little weekendween around Halloween time. Like, I just think it's so much fun, and me and Olivia just have the most fun hosting these readathons together. I just think they're so great. I also wanted to take the time to shout out a couple of the videos that I'm most proud of that I made this year, because maybe if you're like a new subscriber, or if you aren't even subscribed yet, maybe these are videos that you haven't even seen from me yet, but these are the videos that I'm the most proud of that I made this year. The first one is this live show that I did in October. I did a horror recommendations live show with 10 other booktubers, and I'm just so proud of this live show. I just think it was so much fun. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the booktubers that were on this live show, and it was just so much fun to get everyone together and talk about some horror books, and I got so many great recommendations from this live show. And then I'm also really proud of the reading vlog that I did for The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. I dedicated an entire reading vlog just to this book when I read it back in February, and that one ended up being one of my favorite reading vlogs that I made this year, not only because this book inspired me to want to learn more about the Dust Bowl and like that history, but it was also one of the most saddest books that I've read this year, and I was bawling my eyes out in that reading vlog. Like, holy crap, it was a lot. I also am really proud of the drowning in horror books video that I made. I made this back in March, and this was a video that I worked so hard on because I found a couple books that have a horror theme of like underwater or like some kind of water element in the horror books. So I read those books for that video, and I also was able to include some really cool like water transition sounds and just like a lot of water related things. Like, my intro was like underwater themed, and like I just really went all out on this video, and I'm really proud of it. And then the last two videos that I wanted to mention was the video where I read your horror recommendations and the video where I read your thriller recommendations. I think both of these videos were so much fun, and I would love to continue to do this in the upcoming years, like reading your recommendations of a specific genre, because I just think these videos were so much fun to make, and I genuinely read some of my favorite books of the year because of your recommendations, and like, how cool is that? But yeah, anytime I get the chance to read your recommendations, it's just so fun. Like, let's do it again. And as far as different like video series that I continued or started on my channel this year, I did continue doing the like reading another booktuber's favorite books this year. I only actually did a video for Noelle back in January, like a really long time ago, and then I did Kayla's favorites again around like May. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm going to be continuing this series or not. I think I'm going to continue to do this, but just tweak it a little bit, like tweak how I do it. So I don't know if I'm going to do videos like this anymore next year. I did start a new series on my channel this year that's like book shopping in different cities in Washington with my mom. Like, we went to Oak Harbor, La Conner, and Seattle this year. I only ended up doing the 2 videos this year, but I definitely have plans to continue this series for next year. I just think it was so much fun to get to like go out and spend the day book shopping with my mom and explore like new areas of Washington that I've never been to before, you know, because even though I've been living in Washington for about 6 years now, there's still so much of Washington that I've never seen before. So I would really love to continue this series next year. I also started making these like really thorough reading guides for specific authors. Like, this year I made one for Riley Sager and Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is fitting, you know, because I consider them both to be some of my favorite authors. And I thought these videos were so much fun to make, and it was really fun to like dissect their different writing styles and like figure out recommendations for certain kinds of people. And I also loved finding a Taylor Swift song recommendation for every single one of their books. Like, those videos were just so much fun, and I think I do want to do more of these next year. I would love to know if you have any specific authors that you would like to see me do this kind of video for next year. I know I get asked to do Colleen Hoover all the time, so I'll probably end up doing a Colleen Hoover video like this, but let me know if there's any other authors you would like to see. I did more try chapter videos this year, but I also tried to include something more fun. And so in those videos, as well as trying the books, I also included, you know, sampling some wine or like trying different candy that I've never tried before in those videos. And they ended up being so much fun. Like, they were some of my favorite videos that I did on my channel this year, and I definitely want to continue to do these kinds of videos next year. I just think they're so much fun. And then lastly, I made a lot of videos this year that were like reading 3 new horror books, or like reading some hyped horror, reading 3 new hyped romance books, just some kind of themed reading vlog vlog in that way, like reading most anticipated books, reading new thrillers, like things like that. And those are usually my favorite kind of vlogs to make because they're themed, but they're not like too intense of a theme where I feel like I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy the books or not because I'm just reading books that are within one of my favorite genres. But I definitely plan to do more videos like this in the future because these are like my comfort reading vlogs, like my go-tos. I did also want to touch on the Stephen King reading vlogs that I do because, you know, last year I did quite a number of Stephen King reading vlogs. Like I kind of made it my goal to try and do them like once a month. But this year I only ended up reading like 4-ish Stephen King books. I was gonna do a reading vlog for The Green Mile and I ended up DNFing this 30 pages in. So this didn't end up happening, so I didn't really read that. And then I did read 3 Stephen King this year. I did read Carrie, but I didn't even do a dedicated vlog for this. I kind of included it in like a reading classic horrors vlog. So then the only dedicated Stephen King reading vlogs that I had this year were for The Stand and for Later, which I'll include both of those links down below if you would like to see my full vlogs dedicated to these books. But definitely The Stand was the most interesting experience this year. I mean, it was very, very long, and so I felt very accomplished to have read this book and like did a whole reading vlog on it. I just thought it was so much fun. I don't know, like I don't know if I'm gonna continue doing dedicated Stephen King reading vlogs going forward just because I find that most of his books end up being just fine for me. Like most of his books end up being like a 3 to 4 star or like even a 2 star. Like I don't know, like the only Stephen King book that I've given 5 stars to, I'm pretty sure, is Pet Sematary and 11/22/63. But besides that, most of his stuff ends up being just alright for me. So like I don't know if I'm gonna be doing like dedicated Stephen King reading vlogs in the future. If anything, I might do what I did with Carrie, like where I kind of include one of his older books in a video of like reading some other classic horror books, because I would like to read a few more like classic horror books next year, because since I'm still so new to the horror genre, I haven't read a lot of books that are like classic horror. And so if you have any classic horror recommendations that you would like to see for videos like that, then please let me know. But I think I'm going to be starting to stray away from just a Stephen King reading vlog. Like maybe I'll do it with his newer releases. Like maybe I'll still do one for Billy Summers. I haven't really decided yet, but let me know if that's something you would like to see or if you just don't really care anymore either. Right, and I think that that's a wrap on my stats video for this year. I also did want to mention the fact that if you don't follow me on Instagram, my book Instagram is @_myfictionalworld, and over on my Instagram I've been posting little like book reels from my wrap-ups like every single month. So if you were ever curious to check out like which books I was reading in a certain month, I do have these cute little like wrap-up kind of reels that you can watch that I post monthly of like all the different books that I read that month. So yeah, my Instagram will be linked down below. And yeah, wow, thank you so much for watching this video. I'm sorry it ended up being pretty long here. I just had so many exciting like little stats that I wanted to mention for this year, and I'm so curious to know like how many books did you read in the year of 2021, and like what was the genre that you read the most this year, and were you surprised by it? I would love to know your answers for any of these things that I talked about in this video. Like we can just have a chat in the comments. And yeah, thank you so much for watching as always, and my next video should be the tier ranking every single book that I read in 2021, which I'm very excited to film. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye! What are we fighting for? I can't do this no more. Heading towards the door. What are we fighting for?